Hi, I'm Miss Roz, and today we are going to make pumpkin muffins. All right, let's look at the equipment we need in order to make this. I have a I have a muffin pan. If you don't have a muffin pan, you could also use the rectangular bread pan. If you don't have that, you could also just use any kind of square or rectangular pan would also work. I also then have two bowls, one for liquid, one for dry, and then I also have measuring spoons, measuring cups, measuring spoons, a wire whisk, fork, spoon, and knife, liquid measuring cup, as well as some pot holders because this is the first time we'll be using the oven. Right. I also have ingredients, so I needed some flour, sugar, pumpkin, an egg, butter, pumpkin spice, salt, and then baking soda and baking powder as well. Okay, so it says to preheat the oven, right? So go ahead and figure out how to preheat your own personal oven. All right, and then I also am going to spray my pan, right? The reason I spray the pan is so that my muffins don't stick. If you have muffin liners, little paper muffin liners, you can use those as well. It's entirely up to you what you want to use. I always just spray them because I find it's easiest. When I go to spray this, I will spray it over my sink so that any grease that I have that sprays around gets sprayed in the sink and not all over my floor or my counter. Right? So I'm just going to take my spray can, all right, and then spray it into each cup just to make sure that they're sprayed individually. Okay? And then I'll set that to the side. Right, and then I'm going to actually get my dry ingredients first. Right? I'm going to put my dry ingredients in my smaller bowl. So whichever bowl you're using, you should have two bowls. If you have one, if they're different sizes, put your ingredients in the smaller bowl. Okay, so I am going to get some flour. It says I need a cup of flour. Okay, if you remember from before, you should use a spoon to scoop up your flour. Okay, all right, so I'm going to just scoop up 1 cup of some flour. All right, and overfill it. And then use your butter knife. All right, to level that off. I also need some salt. Okay. I need a 1/4 teaspoon of some salt. Again, salt typically helps to bring out the flavor when baking. Right, and then I need a 1/4 teaspoon of some baking powder. So please pay attention to which ones you need because there are different amounts. All right, 1/4 teaspoon of some baking powder. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of some baking soda. So again, I'm just leveling. And then I also need a little pumpkin spice, right? So the recipe says a 1/2 tablespoon. However, most people do not have a 1/2 tablespoon. Right. One of the conversions you should remember is that there are 3 teaspoons, okay, for every tablespoon, right? So I have 1 teaspoon here, right? But I need a 1/2 tablespoon, which means that, right, I need to measure out 1 1/2 teaspoons, Okay, because if there's 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, a half a tablespoon would equal 1.5. So I'm taking my spice here. Just be careful with this so that you keep as much of the spice in your container. Actually, let's do it this way. All right, so I need 1, and then I need to find my half teaspoon. All right. Okay, 1.5 teaspoons. Okay. And you'll notice that we are not mixing any sugar into here because we are actually going to mix that sugar with my butter. All right, so just mix this so that we incorporate everything and we break up all those lumps in the flour. Okay, and then I also need some, let's see. Okay, so I need a cup of some pumpkin. All right, so I'm going to get my 1 cup here. Measure this out. Okay, for those who received ingredients from me, the pumpkin in your container that I gave you is exactly a cup, so you can actually just put on all the pumpkin that I gave you, and that's the same for this one. But for anybody who's doing this at home and wants to know how to measure, right, put it in a solid measuring cup, okay, and then just put it around, and then you would level it off, all right? So that's 1 cup of some pumpkin. Okay, and then I also need 1 egg. So crack that open. Rinse off my hands. And then I'm just going to beat that up a little so it's nice and mixed. Alright, and then the only other ingredients I should need is going to be butter and then some sugar, I believe. Butter, sugar, yep. Egg. Okay. Now, your butter, if you get them from the store and it comes in 4 kind of sticks like this, right? Each stick is 8 tablespoons, right? For this particular recipe, I need 6 tablespoons, which means I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and cut off at the 6th line. So I have 6 tablespoons. Okay. Now, you can make this recipe and use a stand mixer. Okay. You could also use, if you have an electric hand mixer, you could use that as well. If you don't have either of them, that is fine. You can actually just do it by hand, which I actually am going to do because the stand mixer tends to be kind of loud, so I don't want to have to yell over it during this demonstration, right? But let me just show you what a stand mixer, what I refer to as a stand mixer. So this electric stand mixer is what I'm referring to. You might have a KitchenAid, you might have something similar, but you can use that with the beaters. And then if you also have, some people have ones that you plug in and you can hold by hand and it has the beaters. You can use that as well. So either of those are possible. However, if you don't have a stand mixer, that is perfectly okay. Okay, so what I'm going to actually do is so I have this, I cut this for 6 tablespoons, right? When you start this, these ingredients should be at room temperature, right? So any fat and protein that you're adding into it should be at room temperature. So this has been sitting out for probably about an hour or so just to keep it, just to bring it up to that room temperature. Right now, if this were going to be in my stand mixer, I would just put it in and then I would put it into the bowl, put the beaters in, and then mix it and just let it do it electrically, right? Same thing with my hand mixer, except for I would just be holding it with my hand. But if you don't have it, you can actually, it should be soft enough that you can actually mix it around with a wire whisk, okay? Now, what you want to do is, the reason we beat this right, is because it's incorporating air into it, okay? If you beat this enough, all right, it will start to get nice and light, pale white, almost kind of like a whitish color instead of that bright kind of yellow buttery color, right? And so that's what you want. You want to get it to be a nice pale color. I want to add some air into here, right? Because that air is going to be one of the things that helps to rise my ingredients. Okay, now the thing I need to add in here is some sugar, right? Now this is what we call to cream, right? When you mix a solid fat like butter, okay, or even shortening, okay, and you mix it with sugar, okay, that's what you get what's called to cream, okay? So I'm going to take, because I already have my 1 cup measuring cup is actually dirty at the moment, so I'm just going to actually put in 2 half cups, because that's the same thing. Mathematics, right? So 1, okay, and then 2. All right, so again, 1 cup of sugar, and then 6 tablespoons of the flour. And now what's going to happen is I'm going to mix this I'm going to mix this sugar into the butter. All right, my butter is going to get thick because I'm adding solid into it. Okay, so that means that you need to just get some of that butter out. Right, sometimes I'll use my butter knife to kind of break up some of this butter. All right, and what you're going to do is you're going to hand mix this until all that sugar is nice and incorporated into the butter, right? And it's nice and fluffy. Okay. Now this obviously will take less time if I was using an electric stand mixer, and that's fine, right? But what I want to do is I just want to make sure that sugar gets mixed in with the butter before I start to add other ingredients. All right. All right, so this is all nice and kind of light and fluffy, and so what I'm actually going to do is start to add my other ingredients. So I'm going to add my pumpkin into here. Right, now one thing you want to do is, sorry for the banging, is actually, I would suggest using a rubber scraper to do this. Okay, you'll notice on your rubber scraper you have a round edge and a corner edge. Right, round edges to help when you're using it in a bowl because the bottom is round. However, in my cup, right, if I use the corner edge on the inside, it will help to get out all of that stuff in the corner of my cup. Right, so as I squeeze this all, take this all out. Right, that's how you get all of that extra ingredient from the corner, so that there's no pumpkin in the corners. All right, so I'm gonna add my pumpkin. Right, and then I'm gonna mix my pumpkin and my sugar and my butter in together. Okay. Right. Now I'm just going to make sure that I get all the butter out from my whisk. And again, if you're using an electric mixer, then that's perfectly fine, and you probably won't have this process will not take as long. Right. If your butter was soft enough, right, it should mix very nicely together. Right. If you notice that you have kind of chunks, I would just turn it up a little and beat it a little more, because that means your butter was a little too cold. All right. I'm going to add my egg into there. I'm just scraping everything off. All right, and then slowly mix into that egg. Make sure you don't splatter the egg everywhere. All right, and notice that I keep kind of taking around the edges. Okay. Okay, making sure that I get all the ingredients from the sides of my bowl. Now, if you're using a mixer, right, make sure that you stop the mixer first, right, and then you can kind of scrape the sides of the bowl. Do not put your rubber scraper into the bowl while the beaters are mixing. Right, please make sure you stop it first. All right. So mixing that all around. All right. Now I'm going to add my flour. Right. This is what we call. We're going to do what we call to fold. Right. This is when we gently add flour into this mixture. Remember we talked about before. When you put together flour and a liquid, we create gluten. And I talked about in baked goods, we want to make sure that that gluten is nice and gentle and light, right? We don't want to overdevelop it. And so to do that, we're going to fold in the ingredients, right? So I'm just scraping up the sides of the bowl. Right now, when I fold this in, right, I'm just going to add a little at a time. Right? And then folding in just literally means you're folding the batter over itself, right? And I'm lightly mixing this together, just like we talked about in the pancakes, but now it's in a muffin batter, right? So this time I do want to make sure that that flour does get mixed in, okay? And hopefully it is not lumpy like it was in the pancakes, right? But just fold it in nicely, right? And then once all that's incorporated, then I can add in more, right? And then just lightly fold in the batter. Okay, if you do this all by hand, your hand might hurt a little, so go ahead and change over if your hands are cramping up a little. All right. All right, and so this is what your batter should look like. Right, it should be thicker than what your pancake batter would look like. Right, but now we're going to scoop this into my pan. Right, now there's a couple of ways that you can do this. You can scoop. Right, if you have a muffin, if you have a ice cream scoop, you can use that as one option. Right, depending on if you have it. Another option would be just to use, I typically use the 1/3 cup. Right, I do this because I want to make sure that they're nice and even in size. So what will happen is that I scoop it, right, and then I level it, right, and scrape off any of the extra. And then I'll take that corner edge again and then just scoop it out into my pan. Right now, your dough, this batter should make somewhere between, I believe, it's like 10 to 12 muffins. All right, depending on the size of your muffin pan. If it's a standard size, it's gonna be somewhere between 10 and 12. If you have kind of one of those, some of those muffin pans are extra big, they may be, you might end up more with like 6 to 8, right? But generally speaking, you want to fill your batter cups about 2/3 of the way full, right? Any more and your muffins might get a little too big, right? So just go ahead and scoop your batter in. Right. And the reason I do this, the reason I like doing it this way is because I have a little more control in how much I'm putting in each one. Right? You want to ideally have the same sized muffins, and so if I use a measuring cup, I'm going to get the same amount each time. Just found a little dryness on the bottom, so just make sure I incorporate that in. All right, so I'm not going to continue recording this part, but I am going to fast forward to when you need to put it into your oven. Okay, welcome to my oven, right? Generally speaking, we've been on top of the stove, but now we're going to look and talk about oven and oven safety. Right? Number one, you should have preheated your oven, right? You know your oven is preheated when it tells you the temperature that it's supposed to be at, and you'll also probably hear it beep at you, right? So those are a couple of ways to know that it is preheated. Once it's preheated, right, you can put your muffins into the oven. Okay, what you want to do is, right, you want to stand to the side, right? Most people will stand here and kind of put their face down, and what happens is that all that hot air ends up all in my face, right? So you want to make sure that you stand to the side, right, and then you open it, and notice that I open the door all the way, right, and then I'm going to put my muffins into the pan, into the oven, okay, and push it kind of into the middle of the oven. Right, and then I'm going to close it, set my timer for, I believe, 20 minutes, and then let it go. Okay, so the muffins are done. So number one, be sure to turn off your timer because it gets kind of annoying after a while. And then number two, you want to make sure that you have a cooling rack. So mine is right here, and it's directly on the counter there. If you don't have a cooling rack, you can use you can put it on top of your stove, or you can also use kind of pot holders or something, just so that you don't burn the counter. All right, now, what you want to do is, again, you want to stand to the side and open it all the way. Right, and now I want to check my muffins to see if they're done. All right, one way to do this is just to kind of touch them in the middle, right? And if they spring back, that typically means that they're finished. You can also take a toothpick, or sometimes I'll just take a very skinny knife and go right down into the middle. And if it comes back and there's lots of stuff on it, that means that they're not quite done. So I'm actually going to let these cook for a couple more minutes. Right? Generally speaking, when I bake, right, especially with muffins and things like this, I don't ever include more than 2 minutes at a time. If I think it's almost close to it, I might actually say only like a minute or a minute and a half. So just keep that in mind, that typically I don't go over 2-minute intervals. I'll check back again with you in 2 minutes. Okay, now we're back at 2 minutes again. Right? I'm just going to grab my pot holders. Right? Make sure you have one for each hand, because you take this out with 2 hands. I'm going to stop my timer. Right? Again, I'm going to open up my oven. Make sure that the oven door goes all the way down. Right? Pull this rack out. Right? Use 2 hands. Look at your beautiful muffins. put them on the cooling rack over here, and then push the rack back in, close the door, and then turn off your oven. Okay, my muffins here should spring back a little, right? So ideally, if you press them, right, they should spring back a little, right? And they shouldn't be water or kind of wet, right? So they look great and look finished, and that is the final product of the muffins. Thanks, and see you next time. Alright, these are the muffins all finished. When you're ready to, I let them cool down for a couple minutes just so that I don't burn myself when I touch them. However, a lot of people like to use a knife, but I find that it tends to scratch the bottom of my pan, so I actually like to use a spoon because it helps me be able to scoop these up. Right? The reason that I like to take these out of the pan is because generally they are going to continue to cook just a little in the pan. And if what happens is the heat tends to get stuck underneath, and then you end up with soggy muffins, right? So generally, I like to just turn them. Okay, you can leave them like this if you would like. However, I do like to typically put them onto a cooling rack if I can. So generally, we'll move this over, right? And then just place them onto my cooling rack to cool. Right. If you move them when they're too hot, they might start to fall apart, which is what I'm doing right now. So I'm actually going to not move them quite yet, but I'm going to just let them cool a little more because they're starting to come apart. All right. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys later.